Snow fell that night as if the sky itself had grown weary of holding grief. The wind sang through the empty plains, curling around the broken fences and the ghostly outline of a town already half asleep in its own indifference. Two figures moved against the whiteness, a mother and her daughter, dark shapes swallowed by stormlight. The older woman, Naomi Greyfeather, leaned heavily on her staff, her shawl clinging to her like the last bit of earth she carried from the world behind her. Her daughter, Ishta, walked ahead, her eyes fierce and glinting with something that looked like both defiance and despair. Each breath came in clouds, dissolving too fast to matter. They had been turned away from every door in town, faces at windows vanishing before a single word was spoken, curtains drawn tighter than hearts could bear. The snow thickened, turning sound into silence. Naomi stumbled once, then again, her daughter catching her under the arms. "We'll find a place," Ishta whispered, though her voice trembled against the wind. She had said it many times that night, and each time it sounded less like hope and more like a prayer not to collapse. Her mother smiled faintly, a smile that belonged to another world. "The world gives what it will, child. We only ask." They reached the edge of town where light ended. Beyond lay a single cabin, faint against the ridge, smoke rising from its chimney, a promise or perhaps a warning. Ishta hesitated. Her hands were numb, but something deep inside her stirred at the sight of that smoke. Someone was alive in there. Someone who might listen. Or someone who might turn them away once more. She did not know which frightened her more. When they reached the porch, the boards groaned under their weight. A lantern flickered behind the window. Ishta knocked once gently. Nothing. She knocked again harder. For a moment there was no sound but the storm's voice, then boots on wood, slow and cautious. The door opened a crack. A man's face appeared, half in shadow. He had eyes the color of burnt cedar, a beard rough with frost, and the posture of someone who had forgotten what it meant to expect company. He studied them without speaking, and for a heartbeat Ishta thought he might close the door like all the others. Instead he stepped aside. "Come in before you freeze," he said. His voice was low, reluctant, but steady. The warmth hit them like memory. The fire in the hearth spat softly, casting gold across the rough-hewn walls. The man, Wappy Carter, watched as Ishta guided her mother to a chair by the fire. He handed them a pot of coffee without meeting their eyes. Steam rose, fragrant and human. The old woman's fingers shook as she lifted the cup. "You're far from the reservation," Wappy said after a long silence. "We had to leave," Ishta answered. "The sickness took many. There was nothing left to bury." Her tone was neither defensive nor pleading, merely tired like the snow outside. He nodded once, a small gesture that said he understood loss, even if he didn't understand hers. "You can stay tonight. Storm's bad." That was all. No kindness beyond necessity but enough to save them. He moved to the fire, poking at the logs as though trying to justify the decision to himself. The flames flared and crackled, painting shadows across his face, lines of a man who had seen too many winters, and perhaps no longer feared them. Ishta studied him quietly. His hands were calloused, his coat mended at the elbows. There was something both rough and gentle in how he moved, as if his strength had once been a burden he was learning to carry softly. Her mother fell asleep quickly, her breathing shallow but peaceful. When the cabin grew quiet, Wappy spoke again. "Town folks won't help you," he said flatly. "I know," she replied. "They don't trust easily. They don't trust at all." He looked at her then, properly, and for a moment the air between them seemed to thin. The firelight made her eyes glow like amber beneath snow. He turned away, uncomfortable with the sharpness of the connection. "You can take the cot," he murmured. "I'll sit by the door." Outside the storm howled harder. Inside time slowed. Ishta watched the flames and thought of her father's stories, how the world tests you by giving you to strangers. The room smelled of pine and smoke and something she couldn't name, the strange calm of being allowed to exist. She wanted to thank the man but the words wouldn't come. Gratitude, she thought, is often best left in silence. In the dim light, Wappy's head tilted back against the wall. His eyes closed but he did not sleep. Memories came, uninvited. His brother's cough echoing through another winter, the slow hollowing of a home once filled with laughter. He had not let anyone in since that day. He had not needed to. Until now. By morning the storm had buried half the world. The cabin looked like an island afloat in white. Wappy lit the fire again and set a pot to boil. Ishta rose quietly, wrapped her shawl tighter, and stepped outside to fetch snow for water. The cold bit her skin but she welcomed it, it felt honest. Wappy followed her with his eyes through the window. She moved with purpose, each motion careful, practiced. She returned with a wooden bucket, her cheeks flushed. "Your roof needs fixing," she said simply. He blinked, caught off guard. "You know how to fix roofs?" "I watched my father do it." He hesitated, then smiled, not a broad one but enough to make her heart shift. "Guess we could both use something to do." They worked side by side that day, the air filled with the creak of wood and the rhythm of small talk that never quite became talk. He handed her nails, she handed him shingles. Once, when her hand brushed his, he pulled back too quickly, the touch lingering like a spark in the cold. Later, she caught him watching her from the corner of his eye, his expression unreadable. Inside, her mother dozed by the fire. Occasionally she murmured in her sleep, words from her native tongue that sounded like wind through leaves. At dusk, Ishta sang softly, an old song for safe journeys. Wappy listened, pretending not to. Her voice was thin at first, then grew stronger, filling the room with something neither of them could name. That night, the silence between them was different. It no longer carried suspicion, only the ache of people who had been unseen for too long. Wappy poured her another cup of coffee, his hand steady now. "You can stay longer if you need," he said. She nodded. "Only until the snow clears." But even as she spoke, both knew the snow was not the thing keeping them there. Days became a rhythm. Wappy chopped wood, Ishta cooked. Her mother grew weaker but smiled often, her eyes soft on them both. When Ishta laughed, it startled Wappy. He had forgotten the sound of laughter inside his walls. He found small ways to keep it near, leaving carved trinkets on the table, mending her mother's shawl, fixing the hinge on the door so it wouldn't creak at night. Ishta noticed everything. She never thanked him aloud, but once she placed a braid of willow and thread by his bed, a charm for courage. He found it before dawn and held it as though it might burn him. Still, not all warmth goes unchallenged. A week later, a trader passed through and saw them together, word spreading faster than wind. By evening, Wappy heard it whispered in the tavern, "That Carter boy's gone soft. Took in a red woman." The words dug into him like frost. He knew the cruelty of gossip, how it stripped dignity from good intentions. That night he said little. Ishta noticed the distance in his eyes, the tightening of his jaw. "You regret it?" she said quietly. He shook his head. "No. Just know how folks can be." She looked at him steadily. "Let them be. We have fire." Her calm unsettled him, her certainty like light in places he'd forgotten existed. When she reached out and placed her hand over his, the world seemed to still. Outside, snow fell again, softer this time, as though the sky had forgiven something. The days that followed were quieter. Her mother grew frail, her breath shallow. Ishta sat by her side, singing the same song each night. Wappy stayed close, tending the fire, fetching water, saying nothing because nothing could be enough. One morning, Naomi took his hand. Her skin was thin, cool. "Take care of my girl," she whispered. Then her fingers went still. Ishta's cry broke the silence, low and trembling. Wappy stepped back, helpless, his heart thudding like hooves on frozen ground. He buried Naomi beneath a small rise by the creek, where the first thaw would touch the earth. Ishta stood beside him, the wind pulling her hair free. Neither spoke. When it was done, she turned to him and said, "She is home now." That night, she sat by the fire in her mother's shawl. Wappy brought her a cup of coffee, but she didn't take it. "You've done more than I could ask," she said softly. He hesitated, then crouched beside her. "You don't have to go." Her eyes lifted to his, clear, steady, full of a quiet kind of courage. "And if I stay?" He swallowed hard. "Then I'll make sure you never have to knock again." The fire cracked between them. Words hung in the air, unspoken vows wrapped in silence. She reached out, touching the scar on his hand, and something inside him broke open. An ache that wasn't pain, a warmth that wasn't just the fire. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of melting snow. Spring was still far away, but the air felt changed. When the storm came again, one last time, it found them ready. The wind clawed at the shutters, the snow piled high, but laughter filled the room now. Ishta sang her mother's song, and Wappy joined, his rough voice blending with hers until the world outside ceased to matter. He pulled her close as the door rattled under the storm's force. "You're safe here," he said. "I know," she whispered. "You are too." And for the first time in years he believed it. When morning came, the land was quiet, pure, untouched. The footprints they'd left were gone, covered by the night's mercy. Wappy stood at the threshold, Ishta beside him, the cabin breathing smoke into the pale sky. He looked down at her hand in his and thought how strange it was that all he'd ever feared had led him to this door, this woman, this warmth that no storm could claim. Perhaps that was the way of things out here. The land took and took until only the truest parts of you remained. Inside, the fire still burned. Outside, the snow began to shine like hope.